What's up, guys? My name's Brandon, and welcome back to Apple Weekly. In this episode, we're going to discuss the latest new features and changes found in iOS 17.4 Beta 1, along with a new product that is hinted at in the code, why iOS 18 might be the biggest update in history, some interesting tidbits on the Apple Vision Pro, a crazy AirTag story, and more. And as always, if you want to stay updated with everything going on in the world of Apple, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below and check out the Apple Den newsletter, a new issue just went out on Thursday. All right, so let's start by talking about iOS 17.4 Beta 1. So the public beta was released earlier this week, and Apple did re-release Beta 1 for developer betas as well, for developers, because they just had to match up the build number. So developer Beta 1, the re-release that came earlier this week, is the exact same as public Beta 1, which are both exactly the same as the first beta that came out a couple of weeks ago. I know, kind of confusing, but that's what Apple does just so that the public beta and the developer beta line up and they have the same build number. But nothing has changed since then, except for if you go into settings, general about, and then go all the way down to the bottom, you can see the identifiable region now actually shows your region. So mine shows US, but you can see a lot of that is still placeholder text down there. So that I'm sure will be fixed in beta 2. But aside from that, we have a few other changes that were included in 17.4 beta 1 that I did not cover yet. So I covered quite a few new changes in this update, but we're still discovering more changes as time goes on. And the new one I want to mention here is inside of the clock application. If you go to the stopwatch and start the stopwatch and then go out of it, you will notice that we have a live activity now. You can see it right up there in the dynamic island. And also if we go to our lock screen, you could see we have the stopwatch right there. So that is new. We never had a live activity for that before. It was only for the timers. And if you go into the TV application and you click on one of the movies or the TV shows, and then you scroll down to the how to watch section, that section has been revised in 17.4, so it's now smaller than it appeared on previous versions, and also has more information inside of those cards compared to 17.3. And then before we had a little arrow next to related, but now in 17.4 we have the arrow next to trailers, we have it next to cast and crew, and we also have it next to bundles. So all of those little arrows there indicate that you can click on that and it shows you everything in that section. Now some users were also seeing a new splash screen pop up when they went into Safari for the first time after downloading and installing 17.4 beta 1, and it prompted them to change their default browser. So I would assume this is only for EU users, since they are the ones who can now change their default browser, to Google Chrome or any of those other ones, but there's a new splash screen in 17.4 that tells them about that feature. In the wallet application, if you go to your Apple Cash card and tap on the three dots and then go to card number, you can now set up a virtual card number for your Apple Cash card, not just your regular Apple card, which is nice. Now there's also a notable change in watchOS 10.4 beta 1. So of course you do have to have iOS 17.4 beta 1 installed to install this on your watch. But if you go into your settings here and then you go into the gestures and then go to double tap and then go all the way down to the bottom, there's a new option that says when using Vision Pro, ignore double tap. So you can now ignore the double tap gesture if you're using a Vision Pro. And that's useful because we have those same type of gestures for the Apple Watch to do things like go through your control center, pull down your notification center, things like that. So this is a very useful and a much needed toggle. And then of course, one of the best features in 17.4, in my opinion, is the fact that we can now transcribe podcasts. So if you go into the podcast application and click on the little lyrics icon down there in the bottom left-hand corner, it will now transcribe the podcast and it will, highlight each word as the person is saying it, which is super convenient. And you can kind of scroll down and you can see it gets smaller. You can search for things in there. You can also tap on the three dots and then go to view transcript, and this shows you the full transcript right here, and it's not just correlated to the audio you're listening to. And you could also search by tapping up there in the top right. So this is a well thought out and much needed feature, honestly, for the podcast. So I'm really happy to see this get here in 17.4. And I've heard that some people said you can translate like a Spanish podcast to an English transcript, but I was not able to get that to work on my device. Now, as far as the performance goes on 17.4 beta 1, I actually had a couple of bugs on this first beta, especially when I first installed the update on my main device. So I waited until the public beta to install it on my main device here. And, the first time I installed it, I tried to go into applications and they just would not load. And also all my widgets were blank, just the classic bug that you see with the betas, but a reboot did fix that. Now, I did also have an issue with web browsing where it would not load a web page on both devices on 17.4 beta 1, so that's a bug, and it had nothing to do with my internet either because I turned Wi-Fi off at one point and it was still not working. So there appears to be a bug with that as well. And then there is also a bug with stickers. So if you go into, a message right here and then you go into stickers, you can see that some of these stickers are blank in the viewfinder here, so you can't actually see what you're clicking on, even though there is an image there is an actual sticker there. And then also some people are reporting that stickers are just causing their device to crash. So when somebody sends them a sticker or when you send a sticker, sometimes it will cause your device to crash. So you can see it's not causing me to crash when I send that, but I am having the UI bug here where you can't see some of the stickers. But on a more positive note for 17.4, it seems that Apple is continuing to enhance the performance when it comes to AirPlaying to a HomePod, because now when I AirPlay to a HomePod, it is quicker than it was on 17.3. I've tested this on multiple HomePods and it is definitely quicker here in 17.4, which is good news for me. As you can see, I have HomePods everywhere. And then in terms of battery life, this really blew me away, but battery life is definitely better here on 17.4 beta 1 than I first gave it credit for. So I don't know if it's quite as good as 17.3, but I didn't really have the best things to say about it in my first couple of videos on 17.4 beta 1. But if I look at my main device here, you can see that my battery usage is going down. Like I'm not using as much battery, even though I've spent more time on my phone, like screen idle and screen active. You can see there pretty strong. I mean, 17.4 beta 1 to me has great battery life. Now, there's always going to be people out there who say, battery is draining and things like that. But again, like I always tell you guys, most of the time that comes down to user error. Most of the time, that's just an issue with how they're using their device. But for me, battery life has been great. Okay, so now let's talk about what to expect next from Apple. So we have the calendar loaded up here, and I do think that we're going to see iOS 17.4 beta 2 next week on the week of February 6th. So this is my original prediction when beta 1 first released, my first What's New video. And I think that's going to end up being true, everything I said in that video. But anyways, we should see that most likely on the 6th or the 7th. So Apple doesn't typically release a beta on a Monday. So we should see beta 2 on the 6th or the 7th. And I would expect public beta testers to start getting these public betas within 24 hours. So I know the first public beta was delayed by a few days, but I would not expect that to go any longer than 24 hours moving forward. Now, after 17.4 beta 2, I think we will be on a weekly release schedule. So that means that we should see beta 3 on the week of the 12th, beta 4 on the week of the 19th, RC on the week of the 26th, and then the final on the week of March 4th. That is just my, assumption. That's my prediction. That's what I said originally as well. We could also see it, kind of leak into the week of March 11th, but I think Apple will release it before the EU deadline for side loading. So that's why I think we will see it by the week of March 4th. And also, we might even see an iOS 17.3.1 at some point in February. Since we are still a month away from seeing iOS 17.4, there's plenty of time in here to release a bug fix and security fix update. So do not be surprised if at some point in February, we see a 17.3.1 to address those issues. All right, so now let's move on to the latest Apple news. Okay, so let's start by talking about the biggest news in the Apple world right now, and that is the Apple Vision Pro. So if you did not see my unboxing of the Vision Pro, check it out. It's linked up in the cards up in the top right of this video and also down in the description below. But anyways, before the release, MacRumors reported that Apple sold approximately 200,000 Vision Pro headsets during the pre-order phase, which is more than Ming-Chi Kuo predicted the week before. So he said there's going to be like 160 to 180,000, and MacRumor says it's more close to 200,000. And by now, after all the reviews have come out, I'm sure that number has gone up quite a bit. Now, also late this week on Thursday, Apple did announce that there are over 600 new applications built for the Apple Vision Pro. So these apps include Disney Plus, IMAX, we have Carrot Weather, Zillow, Zoom, several different Apple Arcade games like Super Fruit Ninja, Lego Builder's Journey, Cut the Rope Tightrope 3, and many, many more. And 600 new apps that are built specifically for the Vision Pro is a lot more than people predicted. I think a lot of people predicted like 200 or 300 apps that were made for the Vision Pro, but it's looking like it's going to be a lot more than that. And I did also want to share some tidbits that I picked up from some of the early reviews. Now, of course, I did already share some of my thoughts in my initial unboxing, but I did want to talk about some of the tidbits here as well. So I did notice that, Apple seems to have underpromised and over-delivered on battery life. A lot of people I've watched in these reviews have mentioned that they've gotten a lot longer than 2.5 hours of battery life like Apple claims. Some people even saw or predicted that they could get like 3 to 4 plus hours of usage, which is a great sign. Oh, and by the way, speaking of battery, that battery pack, the cable that is supposedly not supposed to come out or not able to be pulled out was pulled out. So this is removed via a SIM eject tool, and the connector is very Lightning-esque. It's like Lightning Pro Max. It's pretty funny, and that kind of went viral on Twitter earlier this week. But one thing I don't like about the battery on the Vision Pro is that you cannot hot swap the battery, which means that you cannot take it out and put a new one on and, remain doing what you're doing, because the moment that you pull off that battery pack off the Vision Pro, it shuts down. There's no built-in battery, no small built-in battery that allows you to hot swap batteries like we have on the Meta Quest, which is kind of annoying. Also, there is no off button, so it's basically just in standby mode all the time, kind of like we have with the AirPods Max, where they can never turn off, unless they die. So that's something on the Vision Pro as well that is going to be very handy. And of course, I cannot talk about the Vision Pro without mentioning eyesight and personas. So eyesight is where when you can see out into the real world, the people on the outside can see that you can see outside in the real world. Basically, the people on the outside of you can see your eyes displayed on the outside glass of the Vision Pro. So a lot of people, this has been the number one thing I think people have hated on the Vision Pro, but I actually think it looks pretty cool and pretty awesome. And then personas is the other thing that a lot of people have memed to death and people are making fun of. And this is basically when you FaceTime someone, it's basically a 2K version of yourself, like an NBA 2K version of yourself. But what's cool about it is that when you're looking at somebody on a FaceTime call, it's as if you're looking at them in real life. Like the other people can see you turning to them and looking at their face. And also the voices of these people on the FaceTime calls actually comes from where they're positioned in the FaceTime call, which is awesome. That's like full immersion, especially if you're having like a meeting with like 6 or 7 people on Zoom. That's going to be really awesome. And you could also hold up like hand gestures, and only the people that you're looking at, holding that hand gesture to can actually see that hand gesture. The people on this side of you cannot see it. They're just going to see the back of your head, which I just think that's so awesome. It's very, very lifelike. And I just think a lot of people are over-hating this feature. So I don't know. What do you think? What do you think about personas? What do you think about eyesight? What do you think about all that? Let me know in the comments. Okay, so now let's move on to a new Apple product that could be coming this year that we've been waiting on for years now. So in the code of tvOS 17.4 Beta 1, there's a reference to the infamous HomeOS again. So we've seen this in the code a few times before, a couple of years ago, I believe, but this is suggesting that a new HomePod could be on the way with a screen built into the top. So this I cannot wait for. As you guys saw earlier in the video, I am a huge fan of HomePods. I have a ton of HomePods, and I think that one with a screen built into the top, and especially cameras, will just take it to another level. So I cannot wait for that, and it is in the code again of the latest tvOS 17.4. So maybe we'll see this at a March event. I think that is very possible. We cannot rule that out, but what do you think about this? Okay, so now let's move on to something that's coming a little bit further after March into June, and that is iOS 18, because according to Apple themselves, Apple internally, they're seeing iOS 18 as one of the biggest updates, if not the biggest update in iPhone history. Now, do I think iOS 18 will be one of the biggest updates or the biggest update of all time? Probably not. I don't think we're going to see that. But do I think it's going to be the most important update of all time? I think there's a very strong chance that that is a yes. And there's two main reasons I think iOS 18 could be one of the biggest updates ever for the iPhone. Like if you think about the, 2 or 3 things that have always been mentioned at the very top of everybody's list that they want to see changed ever since like the first iPhone came out, maybe not the first iPhone, but ever since these features came out are number 1, side loading, which we're getting with iOS 17. Number 2 is Siri actually being smart and useful. And then number 3 is better text message support with those on Android, aka RCS. Well, we saw one of those solved this year with iOS 17 with 17.4, and that is side loading. And the other 2 of the top 3 probably ever could be resolved with iOS 18. They could be coming with iOS 18. So the first thing I want to talk about is AppleGPT, because Apple is set to finally implement generative AI into the iPhone, into iOS. And Gurman is saying that this should improve both how Siri and the Messages apps can field questions and autocomplete sentences. Apple has also explored generative AI features for other apps, including Apple Music, Pages, Keynote, and Xcode. And we saw that report from 2023 that mentioned how Apple was already creating its own LLM, or large language model, which has been dubbed AppleGPT. So I think that Siri is going to be able to handle a lot more sophisticated tasks. Like Siri is going to be kind of like ChatGPT now, that's the hope at least. And also I think shortcuts especially will be improved quite a bit. But I think everybody's looking forward to how this is going to integrate into the apps that we use on a daily basis, like our messages, our phone, our FaceTimes, all of that. So I'm very, very stoked to, learn more about this. And then number 2 is RCS. Like we've talked about this ad nauseum at this point here on the channel ever since it was first announced last year, but RCS is coming to the iPhone in 2024. Apple announced that themselves, so we know it's coming, and that is most likely going to be in iOS 18. So this is going to be major news because it's going to allow us to actually be able to text with Android users and not have to deal with low quality images and videos. We'll be able to see typing indicators now. You can leave out of group messages where there's an Android user in there. Just so many benefits that RCS will bring that I think it's going to be a huge update that's going to quite literally shape the future of the iPhone. So 2 major features that we've not only asked for years, but also features that are going to completely change the trajectory of Apple, and the iPhone. I think that's going to be massively important for iOS 18, which is why I think it is going to be a massive, massive update. I don't think it's going to be technically the biggest update of all time because most people, associate that with things like when widgets first came out or when you could change the icons on the home screen, things like that. It's not going to be visually, as good as like iOS 14 and iOS 7 and versions like that. But I think, in my opinion, it's going to be very transformative in terms of usability and, the future tech that we're going to see in the iPhone. And I asked this in my newsletter, but do you guys think iOS really needs a redesign? Like, do you really think it needs an overall, icon redesign, home screen redesign? Do you really think we need that with iOS? Like me personally, I don't think so. Like I'm fine with with the way it is right now, but I understand that you guys may have a different opinion. So let me know in the comments down below. Do you think iOS needs a redesign like we got with, previous iOS versions years and years ago? And then finally, as tradition, let's talk about another crazy AirTag story. And we have 2 stories today, 2 quick hitters. And the first story comes out of Washington, D.C., where just last week, a university student was riding his bicycle innocently on the road when he was cut off by a car and was approached by a group of men. They had guns and told him that if he didn't give them his Canada Goose jacket, they'd kill him. Yes, they were targeting him and robbing him for his Canada Goose jacket that he's wearing on his back. So, of course, he gave it to them, but they still assaulted him and knocked him unconscious just for wearing an expensive coat. So police responded by suggesting that AirTags could be a valuable tool to put inside of your Canada Goose jacket when you wear it so the thieves can be tracked down. What a world we live in where you have to wear an AirTag in your jacket just so you can track somebody who robs you and knocks you out. I mean, that's just sad. And that's also another reason why I don't wear anything expensive. Like I don't wear designer clothes or anything like that. You're just painting a big target on your back. So I'd suggest you guys as well, even if you have the money to do so, don't buy designer crap. Like it's not worth it. Now, this second story had me laughing at first and confused, and then it had me kind of sad. So this comes out of Illinois, where a woman was arrested and charged with burglary after she broke into a home and stole 2 Bostitch nail guns and a dish sponge. Yes, a dish sponge. The owner, who had been remodeling the residence, told police that he suspected somebody was coming into the abandoned property and taking things. So he did what any of us would do, and he hid AirTags inside some of the stolen items. And the location data from the AirTags led investigators right to the home of the suspect, where they found some of the stolen items in the car on the dash. Police asked the owner to trigger the AirTag to make a sound, and police heard it coming from inside the vehicle, so she was arrested. Some people are really risking going to jail over a dish sponge. I mean, I hope it was a scrub daddy at least. I mean, I feel wrong for saying that because when I look at this picture, I feel bad for the lady, but still, that is just pathetic. But just a reminder, there's no limit to what you can or should put AirTags in. Like maybe now you need to go put, an AirTag in your scrub daddy on your sink in case somebody comes in and steals it. Obviously, I'm joking, but you guys know that AirTags are so useful to put in anything. And these stories show some pretty bizarre incidents of where AirTags were able to help them out. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, I would appreciate if you give it a thumbs up. Also, be sure to subscribe for a lot more iOS and especially Vision OS and Apple Vision Pro content here on the channel. But anyways, guys, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon.